Welcome back to News Talk. So good to have you with us this day. We turn to internet security now, and the mind-blowing news that the head of the CIA had his personal email account hacked. How could this happen? And what does it mean for you and me and all the rest of us? Adam Levin is chairman and founder of Identity Theft 911 and joins us now. It is great to have you back. Great timing.
And here we are, and in person.
Not on Skype, not on the phone yet. No, it's great to have you here. In some ways, maybe this shouldn't have been a surprise. You think of all the big hacks, the attacks on big corporations and on large government agencies, banks, all the rest of it, the sense that there's so little that's safe out there online. And yet, when we hear that the director of the Central Intelligence Agency had his personal email account hacked, it's still kind of, as I say, mind-blowing.
No, and not to mention also the director of Homeland Security. I mean, this was kind of a clean, higher intelligence official sweep. The sad thing is this is not so much out of the ordinary anymore. If you just put things in context, the Cold War has been replaced by the cyber war, and that breaches have become the third certainty in life, and it is inevitable that each and every one of us at one point in our lives is going to become a victim of some form of identity theft, and will face situations like this. I mean, the real context is this. Since January 1st of 2015, we have been witness to a series of announcements involving breaches both in public and private sector corporations and environments that are mind-blowing. If you think of Anthem, Primera, CareFirst, Excelis, that's over 100 million Social Security numbers exposed, along with a great deal of medical information depending upon the agency. Then you have the Office of Personnel Management, to me the most terrifying of all breaches. Here you had over 20 million people whose Social Security numbers were exposed. You had
both people with jobs in the government now and office seekers who had perhaps provided information as part of the...
And contractors and family members and friends, because 19 million of these files were the background files for investigative reports to determine security clearance. So they not only talk to you, they talk to your family, they get information on them, information on friends, things like that. 5.6 million sets of fingerprints. And when you have situations like this, and especially with data in these reports that is so intimate, you don't want your doctor to know, you certainly don't want your spouse to know, you don't want your friends to know, and you sure as heck don't want a foreign power to know for the purposes of espionage. So what happens here is all of these people are not only exposed to the dangers of identity theft, but they're exposed to the pressures of blackmail, extortion, bribery. This is what's going. Over 1 billion files have been exposed in the past few years to people who were unauthorized that contain consumer information.
Do we lack the technical wherewithal to protect our electronic systems better than we do? Or do we lack the resources to bring best practices to our banking, our email, our government files, corporate secrets, and all the rest?
I don't think we lack the technology. In some cases, we lack the will. In some cases, we lack the understanding. And in some cases, we just can't quite figure out how to put the pieces together. And the problem is, if you talk to law enforcement, they'll admit off the record the bad guys are 5 years ahead of the good guys. And that every time we figure a way to solve a problem, they figure a workaround. So it's a real issue, and that's why the kinds of things I talk about in Swipe and the kinds of things that we're facing require a paradigm shift in thinking. It used to be all about preventative. How do we prevent this thing from happening? Well, the horse is out of the barn on that one. So we have to reorient ourselves to what I call the 3 M's. And this is as applicable to business and government as it is to consumers.
This is your new book, Swipe, that comes out next month. We'll be talking about as soon as it hits store shelves middle of November.
Black Friday, yeah.
Black Friday. Oh, the anniversary of the Sony hack?
1-year anniversary of the Sony hack, and the 2-year anniversary around that time of the Target breach.
Every component of our lives is electronic in some form or fashion. If we're never going to get to perfect security, what I sort of gather from having talked with you and others over time is that vigilance is like the second best approach. Not going weeks on end without checking the credit card statement or the bank account. Make it close to a daily practice?
Yes. The 3 M's really are. First is minimize risk of exposure. And those are doing all the things that everyone's always told you to do, where you don't carry Social Security cards, you limit the amount of credit and debit cards you carry, where you don't give information to people that you don't know, either telephonically, in person, or online, that the only time you allow yourself to be authenticated is if you're in control of the exchange, so you know exactly who you're communicating with, and therefore it's not unreasonable for them to ask you to authenticate yourself.
That's the first step.
It talks about also using long and strong passwords, not easily decipherable, silly little passwords.
That does make a difference.
Oh, it does. It does. Talking about not sharing your passwords or user ID and passwords over your entire constellation of websites. You know, a lot of people would prefer to universally use because they can't remember.
Right.
Well, the only problem is if you get breached any one place, you're now breached every one place. Now, you don't have to come up with the most indecipherable password in the world that you can't remember. But what you can do is come up with a system. Like, let's say there's a phrase. Either you use the phrase and then letters of the site that you're going to, as well as some numbers, or the first letter of each word of the phrase, capitalize some, don't others, use exclamation points instead of L's, dollar signs instead of S's. So develop your system that only you understand. And then
that way you have
wisely.
the root, so you have hopefully a fairly complex base password, and then if it's the bank, you might put a B, or if it's Joe's Bank, you might make it J. So the base password J, your mortgage M, things like that.
That and some numbers and things like that. But you know, try to be very creative. For instance, I say to people,
but not so creative that you can't remember, because we've all had that. And it's maddening. I mean, it really is maddening.
It's very important to mix it up. Also, any opportunity you have not to use your email as your user ID, don't. Because if somebody knows your email, and that's part of your login credential, they're halfway there. If you look at some of the bigger, well-publicized hacks, like the Apple Nudegate celebrity picture hack, there was so much information out there, either because of breaches or social networking or things like TMZ, that people could accumulate that data, use that, figure out what the email address was, what the username, password was, and they walked in the front door. Just like with the IRS breach of the Get Transcript site. It was not some super sophisticated hack. They literally walked through the front door because there was so much information available about people that had been sold on the black markets. So you have to do things like that. Also, never save your username or password in your smartphone to any application, because that means if they get into your smartphone, all they need to do is click and they're into your financial services application. So I know it takes a few extra seconds to type in your user ID and password. You'll be grateful you did.
When credit card and debit card information is stolen, it's obvious what the potential peril is, because people make charges, they charge it. People make purchases, charge it to you, and you then end up in a negotiation or having to deal with banks and credit card companies to get all those purchases that weren't really yours taken off. What about, though, when email is hacked? Or Madison, what was it? Ashley
Madison. Well,
are folks doing it for their jollies, or do they really? Is there more than incidental blackmail that's then done when? I mean, you know, here we have the CIA director, personal email account hacked. When people go for stuff that isn't the obvious monetary stuff, like a credit card, what's the purpose? Is it to see if they can do it, or is it to call up a bunch of Ashley Madison customers and see if we can arrange a little conversation?
Well, again, there are a number of categories of hackers. You know, you have the hackers that are actually working for the government. Then you have hackers that are being contracted by the government. Then you have hackers that do it because it's a cause. And Ashley Madison arguably was a cause. Somebody was very upset with this website, and Sony was a cause with the North Koreans about the movie The Interview. You have that. Then you have the hackers who do it because I can. And in the case of the CIA director, at least from every report we've seen, including the admissions of the hacker, this was a because I can, and oh, by the way, there was something that bothered me and I wanted to make a statement, so it was kind of a combination of the two.
In this case, it was the Middle East.
In the Middle
supposedly.
East. But for instance, when email is hacked, you run the risk of being a victim of spear phishing. And when they're spear phishing you, they're looking for a whole lot more than just some stuff in your email.
Remind me what that is.
Spear phishing is when someone sends you an email directed to you, as opposed to phishing, which could be dear cardholder, dear AOL member. It's directed toward you, and they're asking you to do something, either to click on a link, which may have malicious code, which will then contaminate your computer, turning into a keystroke logger, or they're looking to lure you to some website where they're going to ask you to put in information, making you believe that they're an official organization, either the government or an institution, and they need your social security number, or your credit card information, or something more than that.
It sounds like if you're going to be online, and of course we all are, you're going to be vigilant or you're going to pay the price. We'll talk with Adam Levin again next month about your new book, Swiped, coming out on bookstore shelves in about 4 weeks' time, I gather. We'll have you back and we'll talk about the book then. Thanks very much for your time this time.
Thanks for the invite.
We'll step aside here. When we return, the Washington Capitals, they are on a roll. Sky Kirstein joins us with that after this.